welcome back to the Support the Spectrum channel. Today we're going to be talking about autistic masking. And admittedly, masking is not an experience that is exclusive to the autistic community. The whole spectrum of neurodiversity experiences masking, and there are many misconceptions about it that we are going to get into today. So let's begin. First, let's talk about what masking is. Masking is the conscious or unconscious suppression of your natural behaviors, needs, or expressions to fit into societal norms. For many people, it's a coping mechanism to deal with the pressures of fitting into those norms. And I put norms into air quotes because we talked about how there is no such thing as normal in our last video. Please check that out if you're curious about why there is no such thing as normal. Masking is not deception, it's an adaptation. So that's the first myth I want to talk about, or misconception I want to talk about. Many people say, oh, that person is masking, they're not being their authentic selves, they should just stop. And any masking person will know that that is not an easy thing to do, because it's an adaptation that people start doing from a very young age. It is nervous system driven. It is a nervous system response to the environment that you're in. And so another misconception that people have is that masking is something that happens when someone starts getting to that school work age because they need promotions and they need to fit into, get the certain type of position that they want, or get the certain kind of friends they want, friend group. And that is not true. It doesn't start later in life. It starts very, very early. Babies mask. You have to understand this. Babies mask. I have heard of this one story in particular where a new young mother had her first child, and that child just screamed and cried and screamed and cried whenever they were with that mother. But whenever that baby was then given to grandma or some other person in the support community, the baby was calm, the baby was eating, doing all the things that the mother was not seeing when it was just her and her baby. And that baby has grown up into a child, and she now knows that her child is PDA autistic, pathologically demand avoidant autistic, or persistent drive for autonomy autistic, a autism profile, which we did talk about in our types of neurodivergence in the video asking, are you neurodivergent? So check that out if you'd like. But because she now knows that her child is autistic and pathologically demand avoidant, she believes that behavior to have been a very early on masking behavior. That baby knew that the comfortable environment where they could express their nervous system dysregulation was with mom, and with anyone else, there was this fawn response. So we're talking about the responses of the nervous system when they perceive danger and they're in a survival response. Fight, flight, freeze, and fawn. A lot of people know about fight and flight, common to learn about, especially when you're talking about biology and school and everything. But there actually are two more responses, which is freeze and fawn. Freeze is something like stage fright. You get up on stage and you're expected to perform, and all of a sudden, nothing comes out. But it also could be someone who just freezes up and locks up when dysregulated. If somebody is yelling at someone and they just turn stone cold, that's another example of a freeze response. And then a fawn response is when you perceive danger and you're in a survival response, that is just going with the flow of whatever's happening. So let's say you're with a group of peers, and I'm thinking about teenagers, you know, how teenagers can be. Let's say your group of peers wants to do some sort of prank that you know is not funny and not right, whatever, but you're getting that peer pressure and you feel like you're in that survival response where, okay, I have to go through with this just to get through with it, and maybe I can regulate later, or maybe you're not even consciously aware of what's happening in that moment. But fawn response is very common with autistic people. Sorry, I shouldn't exclude the rest of neurodivergent people because it's common for many other types of neurodivergence as well. Fawning, when an expectation is placed on you that you really feel uncomfortable with, or you perceive that threat, loss of autonomy, and all of a sudden you just have to go with the flow at the same time as your nervous system is freaking out, highly tense. One example I think about with this is that a lot of times schedules are too jam-packed for our neurodivergent friends. Now, I'm going to give an example of my one client who is an adult, and they have, as they've gotten older, they've had less synaptic pruning than neurotypical people. They have more synapses in their brain than neurotypical people or compared to other people. And they actually require more accommodations as they are getting older, especially when it comes to the amount of things on their schedule. So back in the day, less synapses in the brain, they were able to regulate throughout the day, having a pretty packed schedule, 10 hours of social or work time, etc. But as they've gotten older, they found that they need way more regulation time in between activities and at the end and beginnings of their days, and they need their schedule to be less, 5 to 6 hours of work or social time as opposed to the 10 prior. And that is because if they get put into that 10-hour schedule, they're gonna fawn through the entire thing, just go with it, and then possibly have a meltdown, shutdown, breakdown, burnout later that day or later in the week. So I did get a little sidetracked talking about the responses. Let's go back to how masking starts really, really young. Some examples are kids who hold it together all day and release at home. They mimic their peers to blend in, so they hopefully get more accepted, even if it feels inauthentic. They're being praised for their compliance, even when it's just masking, and they may be suppressing their stims or echolalia, some motor movements, because it is not accepted by their peers, teachers, etc. So another part of masking that I really want to talk about is the fact that a lot of people put it on the neurodivergent person to change themselves, to better fit into society, to make the neurotypical people feel more comfortable with their presence, and how problematic that truly is. We should not be expecting neurodivergent people to have to change themselves for us to feel comfortable when uncomfortable feelings are your problem to deal with. All that to say that masking is truly the fault of the unsupportive neurotypical population. It's not the fault of the neurodivergent population. Now let's talk about the role of hypervigilance when it comes to masking. Someone who is used to masking, or someone who adapts to doing it, or is even starting to adapt to it, is super hyper vigilant. They are constantly scanning the room for any sensory or social changes. They're constantly watching the body language. They're constantly listening for the change of tone to see, oh, did that bother them? Is that something that is going to change my behavior? Should I have done this? So paired with all that hypervigilance is this internal dialogue that what they're doing is not right, and constant second guessing themselves. So on top of triggering the nervous system with the fact that they have to change themselves constantly to fit in, there's also that internal judgment of themselves the entire time. Anxiety and stress are one of the main causes of burnout and meltdowns and shutdowns. And the stress of masking in itself is way too much for most neurodivergent people. The cost of masking is exhaustion and chronic stress. The cost of masking is neurodivergent people asking themselves, who am I really? Who am I really? Who is the authentic version of myself that I have suppressed for so long? There are plenty of mental health effects. Trigger warning: suicide, depression, anxiety, the toll it takes on your actual physical health. And the thing is that most people don't even realize that they are masking. For example, I have a younger client. They are 13. They did not know what masking was until they came to see me. We talked about it, and when I started hearing what they were going through, I said, do you feel that maybe your experience is something like masking? What's masking? Masking is this. Masking is pretending and stopping certain behaviors, pretending to want to do certain things. You're suppressing yourself from doing certain things so that you can fit in better and not get made fun of and avoid any type of conflict. And they were like, that. And I had to explain to them, you are masking. And guess what's happening now? Now that it is the end of the school year, they are so burnt out. They've had certain behaviors come forth in school, and that was a result of the entire school year being forced to change, be uncomfortable. And finally, we're getting to the end of the school year, and they have just reached their breaking point. And it's unfortunate because every support person in their life means well, but it took me having to talk to caregivers, talk to school staff, talk to every support person in that individual's life saying, this is not their fault. Just so you know, this is not their fault that you're seeing these behaviors now. We didn't see it all year. They've been doing so good. There's a reason for this. And it is because we put way too much pressure on neurodivergent individuals to fit into our neurotypical society to please us. It's actually really disturbing. Imagine if you were forcing someone to wear a shoe size 2 sizes too small for them all year. Of course, the end of the year, right before that, for me, it would take approximately 2 hours for me to have a meltdown about wearing a size too small shoe. I wear a size too big, actually, because I like having the room on my feet. That is so personal and not relevant. But anyways, of course, by the end of the year, they've had it. That is so uncomfortable for them. They're not receiving the proper accommodations and support. They're being forced to suppress the stuff that comes natural to them. They're being made fun of if they express the stuff that comes natural to them. It is horrible. It is bullying, and more than that, it's just internal bullying. It's like forcing internal bullying on an individual, and it's not right. Another fact about masking is that women and girls are unproportionately affected by masking. There are 2 recent studies about social camouflaging, which is another way of saying masking, and how women and girls were more likely to do it because of society's expectations that they put on women and girls. I have a whole short video on how it is easier to be an autistic boy, and that language even itself is kind of disturbing to say, but it is true in a sense when we're talking about societal norms. Because, and you know what, I want to be more specific. I'm not saying it's easier to be a male autistic person, but I'm saying that how society reacts to a male presenting autistic person is different than how they react to a female presenting autistic person. In a sense that if a autistic female person is having sensory differences, they're just picky. They're just being dramatic. They're just being selfish. And if a male presenting autistic person has sensory differences, it's, oh, okay, that's his thing. Like, he just different like that, and he just needs this a certain way. And we can accommodate to that, right? If a female presenting autistic person has special interests, they're seen as, oh my gosh, you never stop talking about that. So annoying. Like, stop. Where a male presenting autistic person, it's, again, just their special thing. They really like talking about it. They really like obsessing over it. Like, oh my gosh, you're such an expert on it. What a savant. I'm saying these things out of experience. Literally verbatim language I've heard from the different communities that I've serviced or different support teams that I've worked with. The difference is astounding. And these studies that I will link in the description below also show that. Girls learn from a younger age, and they also stay really strict with themselves in the need to mask throughout their entire lives. They will suppress their sensory needs, they'll suppress their social needs, they'll suppress their special interests just to fit in because they are expected to be more empathetic, more socially conditioned. It's really disturbing data. And because girls and women are more likely to camouflage and mask and do it well, they are less likely to be diagnosed. And of course, there are long-term effects of not being validated as a neurodivergent person and of masking for any and all masking person. So another thing we're going to talk about with masking is that masking does not equal success. We need to challenge this mindset that if somebody is masking and fitting in, that means they're successful. Because the reality is that we are doing them such a disservice and we are damaging their nervous system. How is that successful? How is that helpful? Just because someone does assimilate into neurotypical culture does not mean that they are not struggling. Oh, say that again. Just because someone is masking does not mean that they are not struggling. And of course we know masking leads to burnout, shutdowns, and meltdowns. But what is the difference between burnout, a shutdown, and a meltdown? A burnout is a long-form depletion. It is often seen as depression. Shutdowns, or when it's more of an internal freeze response, where that person might become non-speaking for a while or dissociate from things they once loved. And a meltdown is usually that external overwhelm, the yelling, the crying, the fighting. None of these things are bad behavior. They are behaviors, but they are behaviors that are communicating unmet needs. Now, the positive part about all of this is that many people who get diagnosed start the process of unmasking. This process is not linear, just like growth and acceptance is not linear. There are certainly going to be days where you go right back to your masked state, or you get really upset thinking about all the masked moments that you've had in your past, and that can be a really depressing time to be reflective on. There's so much joy in finding yourself, your community, and your freedom, and there's so much grief in thinking about time lost. Both can exist at the same time, and I just wish you all the support in the world if that's what you're experiencing right now. If you ever need to talk to me, send me a message on my website. I would love to help you. Some things that we should do as support team members for neurodivergent people is that we should not force people to unmask before they're ready. That process can be long, it can be painful like we just talked about. So just make sure that you're there listening and supporting and providing nervous system regulation techniques, but you're not pushing them to change, because that's kind of the same thing as pushing someone into a masking state. The next one I'm gonna say, I hope shocks the sound barrier. I hope every person who needs to hear this hears this. We as a society need to stop being so judgmental. That's the only way that masking is going to stop. Reducing judgment, reducing sensory overload, and reducing that societal pressure, social pressure, is the only way masking is gonna stop. And of course, as always, use neurodiversity affirming care techniques. And if you ever need to learn more about neurodiversity affirming care techniques, you can follow at Support the Spectrum on YouTube, TikTok, Facebook, and Instagram. Thank you guys so much for listening. I love making these videos. I hope they are helpful for someone and anyone out there. Please share this information with someone who needs to hear it. And don't forget to like and subscribe. I'll see you in the next one.